One federal minister has confessed, but another is threatening to sue after insiders blew the whistle last night on a culture in Canberra of sexist and sexual wrongdoing.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And 1 week after that bombshell Four Corners episode went to air, there's been plenty of fallout. But even before it was broadcast, the ABC was under fire, as MD David Anderson faced tough questioning in Senate estimates.
It just doesn't sound like it's a story about the culture of the building at all. It sounds like it's a sting about the targets in one party, namely the Liberal Party.
According to Four Corners EP Sally Neighbour, the political pressure on the ABC not to broadcast the programme was extreme and unrelenting. So, credit to ABC management for withstanding it. But after speaking to more than 200 people over 5 months, what did Four Corners actually reveal? First, an extramarital affair between Cabinet Minister Alan Tudge and his press secretary Rochelle Miller, who claimed she was forced out of politics after the relationship broke down.
This isn't okay, the behaviour wasn't okay, and the culture's not okay, and there should be something done about it.
Second was Attorney General Christian Porter, whom it accused of inappropriate sexist behaviour all the way back to his university days, and who, it said, had been openly cuddling and kissing a young political staffer in a Canberra bar in 2017 when he had a wife and young child back home. That incident led to Porter being warned by then PM Malcolm Turnbull that he could be a target for blackmail.
The risk of compromise is very, very real. You know, it's not just the stuff of spy novels.
Porter has denied the bar allegation, and there is no evidence he was blackmailed or compromised. So, does the public have a right to know about such sexual antics and infidelities? Is it really in the public interest that politicians' privacy is invaded and their personal lives exposed? Four Corners reporter Louise Milligan told ABC's The Drum the answer is, unquestionably, yes.
It's absolutely vitally in the public interest because there is a profound power imbalance between ministers of the Crown and young female staffers.
That is a decent argument, especially when federal parliament lags so far behind corporate Australia, where failure to disclose an office romance can be a sacking offence, and where high-profile CEOs like Nine's Hugh Marks have publicly paid the price. Another justification could be that politicians' hypocrisy deserves to be exposed, as journalist Jan Fran told Q&A.
If you are out here espousing family values and you are having an affair, then you are a hypocrite and you don't get to talk about values, as I know Alan Tudge loves to talk about.
That's not a bad argument either, and some say this expose was long overdue. Journalist Janine Perrott, who once had to fight off Malcolm Fraser's unwanted advances, told Crikey readers,
"The real question about last night's Four Corners on political sexual shenanigans is, what took so long?"
But most in the media don't think it's that simple. As Professor Catherine Lumby, an expert on sexual harassment, put it to The Age,
a high bar needs to be set for interrogating people's private lives. We're in jeopardy of falling over the line of concern over sexual assault and harassment, which are live and very important issues, into being moralistic about private lives and relationships.
Lumby did think the ABC report was justified, but her view is not shared by Parnell Palm-McGuinness, who told Nine's Sunday Papers that the programme had not delivered.
The hard-working Four Corners team ended up with a story about an extramarital affair between consenting adults and some pretty shabby behaviour on the part of a minister when he was at university. It's hardly Watergate. Is the public interested? Hell yes. Is it in the public interest? The reverse.
And journalist Jennifer Hewitt spoke for many in the media in admitting,
"Well, I guess I wouldn't have done that story, and I can't quite see the direct link between the public interest about their use, their activities in their jobs and what they do in their private lives, as long as there's not a matter of sexual harassment."
Opinion in The Australian was even more damning, with Henry Ergas arguing there was no justification at all for what Four Corners had done.
It is not merely that the program lacked the slightest pretence of being fair-minded, objective and impartial. The most shocking element was the complete failure to ask and coherently explain why it was in the public interest to devote taxpayers' resources to so shabby a purpose.
And columnist Janet Albrechtsen was no kinder, branding the story a shoddy ABC hatchet job. While The Australian's Paul Kelly reported the government believes the ABC is now operating as its enemy. Louise Milligan rejects these charges, but she accepts that sexism and bad behaviour is not confined to the Liberals. And in her defence, she told The Drum,
over and over again, the two men who featured in our program were named by people across the political spectrum, but most importantly, commonly by people from their own party.
So, what do we think? Well, on balance, I believe the programme was in the public interest, but I have a number of concerns. First is whether the ABC and Four Corners should have devoted so much time and energy to this sort of investigation. On Sky last week, political editor Andrew Clennell told Peter Credlin,
it may have been worth a news story, but I don't know how it was worth a 45-minute Four Corners.
He also pointed out that some journalists who have condemned such stories in the past, the telly's scoop on Barnaby Joyce, for example, have been strong supporters of this one.
If you took that story and made it the front page of the Daily Telegraph, you can bet your bottom dollar that some of the journalists praising that story today would be ardently criticising it and saying it was impinging on people's private lives. So I think there's a real double standard.
But that works both ways, because the folks at News Corp are now the loudest in condemning Four Corners. However, tribal warfare aside, I am uneasy about where this is all heading. In the UK, led in part by the Murdoch press, this sort of scandal-chasing culture is endemic, and it has brought down ministers by the dozen, like David Mellor, who was famously shamed on the front page of The Sun in 1992.
Mellor made love in Chelsea Strip.
The salacious details in that story were largely fabricated, including the claim that Mellor loved toe-sucking. But it allowed The Sun to carry this famous follow-up when the minister resigned.
Toe job to no job.
That same year, the Lib Dems leader Paddy Ashdown toughed out this front-page expose in the Murdoch's Red Top.
It's Paddy Pants Down.
I had 5-month fling with my secretary.
And the following year, another Tory minister, Stephen Norris, narrowly survived this headline in the Sunday Mirror.
My sex every night with minister.
Outing sex scandals remains one of Britain's favourite sports, and it was what drove the tabloids to hack the phones of celebrities, sports stars and cabinet ministers like Labour's Home Secretary John Prescott. So far, this hasn't happened in Australia, but once you agree that the public may have a right to know the lurid details of consensual sex between adults, it's easy to push the boundaries further, and you're then in danger of accepting that anything goes. And were that to happen in Australia, it would justify a far bigger hue and cry than anything we saw last week. And while we're on the subject of the ABC, let's look at another grilling that the Managing Director received in Senate estimates, where the NT's Senator Sam McMahon wanted to know,
do you think that it's okay for a reporter to campaign, if that's in fact what happened, for a politician and 2 months later be engaged back into the newsroom to report on current affairs? Are you aware that some of your own reporters from ABC Darwin have raised this conflict as an issue?
So, what's this, an ABC reporter on the campaign trail? Well, sort of. And the Senator's right that some ABC staff are angry about the potential conflict of interest. The reporter in question is Kristy O'Brien, who's been at ABC Darwin for 11 years and has presented the 7pm bulletin and been editor and chief of staff. More recently, she's filed stories for Landline. Since 2017, O'Brien has been married to NT Labour leader Michael Gunner, who was re-elected as Chief Minister in August. And on election night, she was by her husband's side as he thanked her for her support.
Building a life and a family with Kristy is the best thing I will ever do.
Into the warm embrace of his wife, Kristy, goes the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory.
During the campaign, while she was on maternity leave, but on the ABC payroll, O'Brien featured in happy snaps on her husband's Facebook page. The ABC denies this amounts to campaigning. But what really upset Senator McMahon and some of Kristy's colleagues was this event at a local shopping centre last month after she returned to work.
Gateway invites you to have morning tea with Kristy O'Brien.
New mum, award-winning journalist and NT Chief Minister's wife.
That cosy conversation, mixing O'Brien's roles as ABC journalist and NT First Lady, left staff wondering why management allowed it to happen. More seriously, the critics argue her senior position in the newsroom may skew the ABC's editorial judgment. Last month, the Chief Minister was attacked by the opposition for axing 2 parliamentary committees that scrutinise new laws.
This is a clear sign that the Gunner government's greatest agenda is to run from the truth and hide from scrutiny.
The NT's 9 News ran the story on 3 consecutive nights, and a press conference saw this heated exchange between Michael Gunner and the ABC's Jacqueline Breen.
You've just said that there's not less scrutiny in Parliament after you've abolished 2 scrutiny committees.
That's correct.
That just doesn't pass the pub test.
No,
to
that's
say
incorrect.
So.
No,
One of your major criticisms
It's
of the
not a
previous
debate. You've
government.
asked a question.
One of your major
Stop.
questions of the previous government was about their
Stop.
arrogance. Are you doing the same thing?
No.
Fiery stuff, yet that tape never made it to air on the ABC that night. There's no suggestion that O'Brien made that decision, but it prompted the NT Independent, who are critics of the Labor government, to suggest
maybe it was because they wanted to suppress negative publicity of the Chief Minister because his wife works for them.
that is a serious charge, which the ABC denies. But critics point to other examples. In 2018, O'Brien wrote about plans for a rocket launch pad in the Territory, which was being pushed hard by the Gunner government. And she led the story like this.
Negative commentary about plans for Australia's first commercial space centre could dissuade other prospective investors to the East Arnhem Land region, a local Indigenous group has warned.
In April 2019, O'Brien wrote a glowing piece on the Arafura Games, which the opposition had described as a loss-making government initiative. And in August 2019, she wrote an upbeat story on the benefits of hemp cultivation after the government opened up the market. MediaWatch has spoken to several ABC journalists who say there is a conflict of interest here and management is not taking it seriously enough. One told us,
there has been no open discussion on this situation and it remains as the elephant in the room.
And another reported a
general malaise around ethics, little drive to chase down hard investigative news, and cronyism, which comes down from the top.
Now, nobody is suggesting that O'Brien is a bad journalist. She's won numerous awards for her reporting and filmmaking. But, as the NT Independent editorialised last month, O'Brien's situation
creates a problematic conflict of interest for the public broadcaster that calls into question the integrity of all of ABC Darwin's excellent journalists until it is properly addressed.
So, is it being properly addressed? The ABC told us in a statement that it has, quote, put additional oversights in place to ensure there are no conflicts. And it assured us
Ms O'Brien is employed as a journalist reporting on general rounds in the Darwin newsroom and is not in an editorial decision-making position. Her work can be assessed on its merits and the ABC is satisfied it meets our editorial standards.
Well, all we can say about that is it does not yet seem to have satisfied local ABC staff. And let's finish with the media coverage of some important news about how not to spend your money.
And finally, we can reveal the worthy winners. The choice shonkies are the Oscars for dodgy consumer products. And it's very likely you've purchased at least one of these duds yourself.
Yes, this year there were 5 winners of the Choice Shonky Awards, including one very well-known name.
Harvey Norman hits an off note with their stupidly expensive Latitude Finance credit card.
Harvey Norman sells credit cards with interest rates of 22.74%. That's incredibly high when the cash rate is only 0.25%.
Now, Harvey Norman is big business for the media. So when it came time to parade the winners, there were some awkward moments, like this one.
Let's go to Jonathan Brown, who's from Choice magazine. Who have you named and shamed this year?
We also have Harvey Norman. Now, this is an interesting one because we're
careful, they're a sponsor of Triple M.
So, with Harvey Norman effectively paying some of the bills, what happened next?
The interest rates are pretty high, are they?
Well over 22%, which is one of the most expensive on the entire market of credit cards.
Okay. Well,
so you can't accuse them of being shonky. You can say that they charge a lot for their credit card.
Incredible. A live on-air U-turn from Triple M Adelaide's Brecky host. And no doubt because no one spends more on advertising in Australia than Harvey Norman. Last year it spent a whopping $165 million, or $50 million more than Woolies at number 2. And although this year's figures aren't out yet, it's a safe bet Harvey Norman spent even more, thanks to a pandemic-driven retail boom. As the Cairns Post reported,
Harvey Norman has put a huge amount of our marketing budget into print advertising. And all of a sudden, our sales went through the roof.
And he's not kidding. Papers owned by News Corp and Nine have been chock full of Harvey Norman full-page ads, and they've even crowded out front-page news. So, how did those papers report on Harvey Norman's Shonky Award? In short, they didn't. That's right, we can't find any mention of the Shonky Awards this year in any Nine newspaper, print or online, even though they've covered the Shonkies for years. And at News Corp, who've also covered the Shonkies in the past, the only story in the Metro mastheads was in news.com.au, where, surprise, surprise, Harvey Norman's Shonky credit card did not get a mention. And it does not stop there. Nine Radio's new Drive presenter on 2GB, Jim Wilson, loves the Shonkies.
It's that time of the year again when the annual list of Shonkies is revealed. The products and services that promised you the world but failed to deliver.
But in nearly 5 minutes of chat, Jim hit up every Shonky winner except Harvey Norman, before telling listeners...
Well, there's the Shonkies list for 2020 and buyer beware.
Or, in this case, listener beware. And if that's not Shonky, how about Helen Wellings, a long-time consumer champion who also managed to avoid naming you-know-who in Seven's 4pm bulletin.
Shonky Awards also went to a store credit card with sky-high interest rates.
A store credit card? What? No name? But at least in the 6pm bulletin, we got to figure out the answer, even if they were too shy to say it.
Latitude store credit cards.
So, why couldn't the Nine papers and News Corp even bring themselves to report on Harvey Norman's Shonky Award? News Corp declined to comment, while James Chessel says Nine papers simply missed the story, that it has nothing to do with ad dollars, and he points out...
We've written critical stories that mention Harvey Norman when appropriate, including a recent investigation into horse cruelty in New South Wales.
2GB's Jim Wilson also denies any commercial pressure and says there simply wasn't time to go into the complexities of credit card financing. But Jim, all you really needed were 2 words. Harvey Norman.